Have you ever stood in the quiet of your own being, only to feel the chaotic winds of another's anger beating against your door? A storm you did not create, yet one that seeks to break your peace. They are furious. But I invite you to step back from the storm and look at the sky. What is a storm? Really, it is a place of deep imbalance. It is not strength. It is chaos trying to find a center it does not have. Their game has crumbled, not because you fought back, but because you refused to be a player. When a person builds their life on shadows and illusions, they forget that a shadow needs a source of light to exist. You were that light. And when you chose to move, the shadows vanished, and they were left in the darkness of their own making. This is the great error of those who walk a path of cunning. They mistook the stillness of your spirit for weakness. They looked upon your deep, calm waters and believed them to be shallow. They saw your kindness, your patience, your loyalty, and they called it foolishness. They failed to understand a simple truth taught in my tradition. True strength does not need to announce itself. The mountain does not scream to prove its stability. The deep ocean does not thrash to show its power. Your kindness was not an absence of boundaries. It was a conscious offering of peace. A gift they did not have the wisdom to receive. And so, they wove their webs, believing they were the masters of the story, that you were a character they could control. But they could not predict the one thing they never cultivated in themselves, your evolution. You simply walked away from the board. You stopped feeding the fire. You chose the clarity of truth over the comfort of their illusion. And in doing so, you didn't just end the game. You revealed it was never real. Their plan did not merely fail, it turned inward, a poison they brewed for you that they now must drink themselves. A soul that plays such games is terrified of stillness, of accountability. They cannot bear to look into a clear mirror. That is the purpose of the game, to keep a carnival of noise and motion around them, so they never have to face their own inner emptiness. This is why they use others. Others become the distraction. So when you rise, when you reclaim your center, they do not feel relief. They feel a terrifying exposure. The mask no longer fits. The storm they created now rages inside of them, and the one thing they counted on, you staying broken, did not come to pass. You healed. Your healing became the clear, silent mirror they could not avoid, and in it, they see their own reflection. That is their defeat. The rage you feel from them now is not about you. It is the thunder of a collapsing house. It is the roar of a soul wrestling with the shame it refuses to name. It is the desperate thrashing of someone who has lost their source of power control over you. They built a kingdom on illusion, and you have become the quiet truth that dismantles it. Not with a sword, but with your breath. Not with revenge, but with your peace. You became a mirror to their failure, simply by refusing to continue being broken by it. The fact that you did not fight back, that you did not give them a dramatic ending, but simply turned and walked away. This silent, steady act of self-possession eats at their core. Now, they are left to wander the ruins of their own choices. They played a short game of power, forgetting that life is a long, winding path. They chased the brief flash of victory, sacrificing the enduring light of peace. But peace, you see, never comes from domination. It flows from a place of integrity, and so they have none. They are restless, agitated, haunted, not because you hurt them, but because their attempt to destroy you only revealed you to yourself. There is a profound spiritual power in walking away from a battle you were never meant to fight. It dissolves the entire structure of their reality. It forces them to confront a truth they have spent their lives avoiding. Real power does not flow from control over others. It flows from self-mastery. And you, in your quiet healing, now represent that truth. Your calmness is a threat. Your refusal to engage is a threat. Your evolution is the loudest act you could have ever performed. Because silence, true silence, has a weight. And your silence is crushing their illusion. Let them rage. Let their storm howl. It is the sound of fear wearing a costume of anger. The fear of being seen for what they truly are. The fear of being irrelevant to your journey. the fear that they have lost the ability to pull the strings. That fear is their own practice now. It is their own path. You are not required to walk it with them. You have already won. Not by playing their game better, but by awakening to the truth that it was not your game at all. They believed the test was about power. You have shown them it was always about character. And they failed, not because you brought them to ruin, but because they hollowed out their own soul trying to outsmart the truth. And now they must live in that hollow space. You, however, are free, not just from them, but from the part of yourself that once allowed the storm inside. And that freedom, that quiet evolution, is the teaching they will never grasp, because it requires a humility they never chose to cultivate. Let them be consumed by their own fire. You have a mountain to climb. They mistook your compassion for a flaw. This was their first and most profound miscalculation. A mind that only understands power dynamics cannot comprehend the heart. They looked at your grace and saw an opportunity. They took your forgiveness as permission. They believed everyone lives in the same shallow waters they do, a world of strategy, masks, and taking. When they encountered a spirit offering itself without calculation, they did not see a gift. They saw a resource to be used. They thought they understood your heart. They thought they could wound it just enough to keep you bound to them, a well from which they could draw endlessly. In their distorted vision, your mercy was proof of your foolishness, as if setting a boundary were the only sign of strength. This is what happens when one tries to measure the depth of the ocean with a flimsy stick. But what they never understood is that your kindness was not weakness. It was a choice. It was strength under deliberate restraint. It was the warrior choosing peace when they could have chosen war. For so long, you chose peace, not from fear, but from a deeper hope. The hope that if you showed them what wholeness looked like, what loyalty felt like, they might recognize it and rise to meet you. That is not weakness. That is the faith of a powerful heart. It is rare. So you remained. You gave your light to their darkness. You poured your water onto their barren land, and they used it all against you. They turned your virtues into tools for their own agenda, and in doing so, they told themselves a story that you were fragile, that you needed them, that you lacked the spirit to ever walk your own path. This story made them feel solid. It justified their shadows. It gave them a sense of control. But then, the moment they could never plan for arrived, the moment the water became perfectly still and you saw their true reflection in it, the moment your spirit, weary and bruised, decided it had given enough, and you did not become a storm. You did not meet their chaos with more chaos. You simply became the mountain. You stopped moving. You stopped offering. You stopped granting them access to the quiet sanctuary of your soul. You chose your own well-being. And this shattered them. Because the one thing a shadow player cannot tolerate is losing the very source of light they thought they owned forever. The one who kept giving. The one whose silence came from love, not from fear. The game only works when both players are on the board. You picked up your essence, your being, and with quiet dignity, you left the field. Now, their fury is the sound of a crumbling throne. It is not because you wronged them, but because you finally did what was right for you. When you stopped meeting their discord with your harmony, you took away their illusion of control and broke it over your knee. And now they are left with a truth they cannot twist. You were never weak. You were profoundly kind. And they mistook that light for something they could possess. Let this be your peace. They are not upset that you failed them. They are upset that you rose. Your strength illuminated their weakness. Your growth showed them their stagnation. Your silence has become an echo of their own emptiness, louder than all their noise. They are not angry at you. They are angry at themselves, a truth they will carry to their graves. Deep down, they know they held something rare, and they chose to break it instead of honoring it. This is the path of those who live by shadow. They destroy the very things that could have brought them into the light. And by the time they realize it, the kind one has found their voice. The loyal one has found their own way. And the silent one has walked on with conviction. That's when they finally see your kindness was never a weakness. It was a gift. One they did not honor, and one they will never receive again. All they have now is the silence, the void, the echo left by a soul they thought they could trap forever. And no matter how loud their anger gets, the truth haunts them. They played a game and revealed their own hollow core. You are not broken. You are not bitter. You are awake, strong, and finally, free. Your growth casts a light, and that light revealed their shadows. This is why they cannot bear your presence. When you begin to heal, to expand, to become more than the small story they had written for you, you challenge the very ground they stand on. Their influence only worked as long as you doubted yourself. Their sense of power was nourished by your uncertainty. While you were lost in the fog they created, they could control the weather. They could tell themselves you were the one who was lost, that they were your guide, that their version of reality was the only one. But once you started to awaken, that entire architecture began to tremble. They exist in a world where you must remain small, your spirit held down by stones of fear and misplaced loyalty. They help place those stones, sometimes not with great, violent acts, but with the smallness of a subtle dismissal, the twisting of memory, the withholding of warmth. These were not mere behaviors. They were the actions of a spirit deeply needing to feel superior, because it could not feel whole. If you ever saw yourself with clarity, it would reveal how empty their own vessel was. And then it happened. Your practice began to bear fruit, perhaps quietly at first. You began to create space for your own breath. You stopped reacting. You no longer rushed to fill silences with explanations. You no longer tried to mend what they consistently broke. You became still, watchful, rooted in the earth. This terrified them. The more grounded you became, the more the ground shook beneath their feet. They saw the light returning to your eyes and knew the spell was broken. Growth doesn't just heal you, it illuminates everything that was untrue. Your calm presence exposes their inner chaos. Your new boundaries highlight their disrespect. Your very being, standing in your own truth, becomes the confrontation. You didn't have to raise your voice. Your existence as someone who would no longer be diminished was the indictment. And they rage against this, for they are being seen for the first time without their mask. They couldn't twist your words because you weren't speaking them. You had changed, and that change made it impossible to return to the illusion. It is like waking from a dream. You cannot force yourself back to sleep. Worse, for them, others started to see it too. Your energy shifted. You began to carry a different light. The story they told about you, the weak one, the unstable one, no longer matched the person standing before them. This contrast was unbearable, forcing them to see their own lies. They called you cold or selfish. But you were not being selfish, you were being self-full. You were done being a vessel for their needs. You stopped giving them access to your inner world. Your emotions were no longer theirs to play with. Your silence became a vast temple they could not enter, and it left them exposed, shivering in a world where they thrived on shadow. The truth is, they never had power over you. They only had the power granted to them by your self-doubt. The moment you became certain of your own soul, their power evaporated. They were left with themselves, and that sight was unbearable. It is easier to hate the light than to admit one has been living in darkness. But your growth was not for them. It was not an act of revenge. It was an act of peace. You grew because you were tired of living in a small room to protect their fragile sense of self. You grew because your life was meant for more than survival. And in doing so, you became dangerous to them. Not because you were cruel, but because you refused to be controlled. They do not hate you because you wronged them. They hate you because you stopped believing their story about you. That is what they cannot forgive, that you not only exposed them to the world, but you exposed them to themselves. And every time they see your peace, your growth, it is a reminder of who they are not. It reminds them that they lost something true, and they lost it with their own hands. This is the beauty of your transformation. It did not just save you, it revealed them. Your silence is a vast ocean, and their rage is just a noisy wave on the surface. That is what is driving them mad. One who is used to controlling the world through noise depends on your reaction. They feed on your defense, your tears, your anger. As long as you answer, you are still bound to them. But when you go silent, not from weakness, but from clarity, they lose their sustenance. They lose the illusion that they matter more than your own peace. Your silence becomes a mirror they cannot break and a sound they cannot drown out. They hoped you would scream. They wanted you to shatter, to plead, because then they could point to you and say, "You see, they are the chaotic one. They are the problem. This is the way of the shadow weaver. They set the forest on fire and then blame you for fleeing." But when you refused to play, when you stopped giving them your emotional energy, you took away their oldest weapon, your own engagement. Your strength manifested as stillness. Your greatest power was to turn and walk away, leaving no handles for them to grab. They do not understand this kind of peace. To them, silence is a punishment because they live in a world of constant noise, drama, and conflict. Your silence is not just a lack of words. It is the final chapter of their relevance in your book. This is unbearable to a spirit built on being the center of another's universe. They rage now because they are powerless, because your detachment speaks a truth more devastating than any argument. You no longer deserve an explanation. You no longer have access to my soul. And that, more than any confrontation, undoes them. Silence confuses those who are accustomed to doing harm without consequence. They expect a fight, because fighting is a sign of connection. It means you still care. When you withdraw, it signals a deeper reality. They no longer matter. Not to your path, not to your heart, not to your future. It's not that you had nothing to say. You held oceans of pain, entire libraries of betrayal. But you learned a core lesson. Not everyone is worthy of your voice. Some listen only to find ammunition. So you chose silence, not out of fear, but out of profound wisdom. When you have seen enough, you realize the most powerful response is to say nothing and to continue your journey. The irony is that your silence is now the loudest thing in their life. It echoes in the spaces where you used to be. It haunts their quiet moments. When the attention they crave from you vanishes, they are left with themselves. They tell themselves stories that you are cold, that you changed, that you never cared. But deep down, the soul knows the truth. Your departure was not sudden. You gave them many seasons to change. You stayed long after your own spirit began to dim. Your silence was earned. It was the final, sovereign act of a person who finally recognized their own worth. Let them rage. That is not your burden now. You do not need to defend your peace. You do not need to explain your silence. The ones who understand need no explanation. The ones who do not were never capable of understanding in the first place. What matters is that you are free. You no longer need to be heard to know your own truth. You have outgrown the need to prove your light to anyone who only saw it as something to consume. In a world drunk on noise, your silence is your sanctuary. And for those who once thrived on your chaos, it is their mirror. Their anger is a mask, and beneath it is a shame so deep it is eating them from the inside out. On the surface, you see the storm, the rage, the blame, the lies, but deep in the quiet place behind their eyes, the truth lives. They know what they did. The anger is just a shield. It is the noise they make to avoid hearing the quiet, persistent whisper of their own conscience. Shame is not loud like anger. It follows you into your quiet moments. But they will never admit to it, for to admit shame is to admit fault. And for a spirit built on the illusion of control, facing their own fault is a kind of death. So instead they rage. They must find an enemy outside, because the enemy within is too terrifying to face. You became that enemy, not because you fought them, but because you healed with your integrity intact. Your dignity is an unbearable reflection for one who has none. When they see you rise, it forces them to feel everything they have been running from. Your silence holds them accountable in a way that words never could. Every time your name crosses their mind, they are reminded not just of what they did, but of what they lost. And it is not the loss of control that truly haunts them. It is the loss of your respect. They were not just a person they hurt. You were a person who saw the light in them, who offered them grace. To know they betrayed that shame is the sharpest stone in their shoe, so they bury it. Under anger, under denial, under stories where they are the victim. They will say you abandoned them, you changed, you were too much. Anything to avoid the sickening truth of regret. But inside, where the truth lives, they know. They know you were good. They know you did not deserve it. And they know there is no road back. They are still talking about you, thinking about you, not because they have moved on, but precisely because they cannot. What they lost was real, and in that empty space, they must sit with the reality of who they are without your light. They did not expect this. When they played their games, they thought they were winning. But a house built on sand cannot stand. And strength built on the betrayal of a trusting heart will eventually rot into weakness. You do not leave that kind of action clean. You carry the stain of it in your soul, even if you wear a mask of rage. They may never apologize, but do not mistake their lack of apology for a lack of consequence. There is a war inside them now, a war of their own making. And every time they see you living in your peace, it is another quiet battle they lose. You were supposed to stay broken. They thought if they dimmed your light, theirs would shine brighter. All they did was plunge themselves into darkness. Let them rage. Let them project. The truth defends itself. In time, the mask cracks. Rage burns out. But shame lingers. When all the dust of their storm settles, they will still be left with the one thing they cannot outrun themselves. And the truth that they destroyed something beautiful, not by accident, but by choice. You, on the other hand, are free. You faced the darkness and chose to rise. You let go not because it didn't matter, but because you finally understood that you mattered more. You own your story. They are still running from theirs. And until they stop hiding, they will never find peace. Deep down, they do not hate you. They hate themselves for losing you.